because we're all reading it, we kind of interact with each other around that reading. But because of where I've been for the last couple of weeks, I just felt that this was a good moment, particularly as it's Advent anyway. But while it's kind of in my head and fairly clear, I thought I'd go through at least some of what I've learned about Revelation and the end times over the next couple of weeks. So today's going to be kind of an introduction, building a bit of a framework, and then next week we'll kind of put it in the meat in the sandwich, so to speak. So if you turn to Revelation chapter 5, and Revelation's near the end of the Bible. I know we don't often go there very much. We'll talk about that in a moment, but it is there. And Revelation chapter 5, and we're going to read the first 14 verses of that. Before we do, let's hold in our hands our Bibles and let us say these words together. I hold God's word in my hands. It encourages, corrects, and instructs me. Lord, speak to me now. So our passage is Revelation 5. It's around page 1237. 1237, somewhere around there for a church Bible. We'd really encourage you to pick up a Bible and have it open and read it yourself, rather than just trust what I'm right at reading. It makes it a lot easier to concentrate if you're reading the word as well. Revelation chapter 5. And perhaps we'll have the video on now, Keith. It is on. Then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides and sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, "Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll?" But no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. I wept and wept because no one was found to be worthy to open the scroll or look inside. Then one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals." Then I saw a lamb, looking as if it had been slain, standing at the centre of the throne, encircled by 4 living creatures and the elders. The lamb had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God, sent out into all the earth. He went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who sat on the throne, and when he had taken it, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. Each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of God's people. And they sang a new song, saying, "You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, because you were slain, and with your blood you purchased for God persons from every tribe and language and people and nation. You have made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God, and they will reign on earth." Then I looked and heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands, and 10,000 upon 10,000. They encircled the throne and the living creatures and the elders. In a loud voice they were saying, "Worthy is the Lamb who was slain, to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honour and glory and praise." Then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and on the sea, and all of them were saying, "To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be praise and honour and glory and power forever and ever." The 4 creatures said, "Amen." And the elders fell down and worshipped. That's a good start. If we're honest, We all struggle reading the Bible, right? I mean, you know, you can be honest. We all struggle reading the Bible in some way. And we struggle to set aside time to do it. We struggle in knowing what to read, when to read, how to read. We struggle with just a lot of things about it. And the best way to kind of dedicate and commit yourself to reading the Bible, you know, you can try this in the new year, and a lot of us kind of make these New Year's resolutions. Yeah, we're going to read the Bible this year, and we flounder sometime February. But there are different things that you can do. I picked off the shelf that's been sitting at the back there for I don't know how many years, and obviously no one's taken it for a year because it's still here. The Bible in 1 year. Some of you may have something very similar. It's kind of the Bible chunked up, if you like, into 365 passages, dated. And it's not just chronological, it's taken some Old Testament, takes some of the Psalms, takes some of the New Testament, kind of pulls it together. And if you read this book day by day, you probably have to read about 3 pages a day. You read the whole Bible in a year. So it's a pretty good way of doing it. Dedicate yourself to it. It still means that sometimes you might miss a day or 2 or 3, and then you kind of look and you think, now I've got to read 10 pages, and that makes a struggle. But you know, resist putting it down and just keep going. So that's one way of doing it. I'll put that back over on the bookshelf in case you want to take it, or I'll leave it there and take it. You can challenge yourself, and you can say, right, I'm going to read the Bible in, say, 5 years. So that's probably a page a day, isn't it? And you set your own target, and again, there's other different ways of doing it. You can find lists and so on that give you all the Bible passages. You can tick them off and say, yeah, done that, done that, done that, and work your way through it in so many years. There's audio versions of the Bible, and if you ever want an audio version of the Bible, you can either give me a little memory stick, and I'll put it all on there, and you can play it on your computer or your laptop or something like that, or I can start putting it onto disc. It takes a little bit longer than a disc, but it's certainly worth it. So if you want to listen to the Bible being read, and that's not a bad thing. You might think it's a lazy way, but actually when you start hearing the Bible being read to you, and you sit down and listen to it, you kind of think, oh, I remember that bit being in there, I remember that bit being in there. Because you're hearing something a little bit different to just scanning the lines. So there's that way of doing it as well. But usually, I guess what a lot of us do is we get something like a daily bread Bible notes, or whatever you've got, and there's all sorts around. And you're going to think, yeah, at least I'm going to sit down, I'm going to read today's passage, and I'm going to read a little Bible verse or a few verses they give, and then I'm going to read what they say about it, and I'm going to pray at the end, and I've done my kind of quiet time. And that's good, not knocking it at all, it's really good. But of course, that isn't even a 5-year plan. In fact, what they tend to do, a lot of these people that put these books together, is they kind of think, we'll get some key passages from the Bible, and we'll do it over the course of 4 or 5 years, and we'll put that into a booklet, and they kind of almost do a rota then. But they miss out huge chunks of the Bible, quite often, even over those 5 years. And so some of the books of the Bible never really get touched in those Bible reading notes. And left to our natural resources, whatever plan we tend to do, I guess we will skip quite often the book of Revelation. How many of you have skipped the book of Revelation? Come on, honest. If you kind of read through your Bible, you think, oh, I'm not going to go through that because I'm really confused about it and so on. Yeah, some of you might be honest, because a lot of people, probably most, kind of skip it or read some of it. Yeah, I'll read the letters, I'll read the first 5 chapters, and then it gets a bit dodgy and I'll put it down there. And it becomes really hard to read Revelation without any other input to it as well. Save that I said earlier, that if you do nothing else, read the book of Revelation, it's supposed to be, obviously, thinking about the second coming and what's going to happen and so on, and we're going to go through that. But if you do nothing else but read it in the light of God's glory and who Jesus is, just read through those 22 chapters at some point and just pick out that bit. Don't worry about all the other things that are going on, but kind of think, this is Jesus, this is Christ, this is God's Son. And you get a new image of who he is. But I'm going to talk about that later on next year. But there's a challenge for you. Read Revelation just in the light of who Jesus is. Amazing. Okay. So, we'll kind of say, it's so complicated. You kind of get into the first few chapters and it's already got the letters there and all that. But once you start getting into all the imagery and that, it's so complicated. There's so many different views about it. How do I ever hope to know what it's all about, you might say? So we often skip it, as I have the last few years. And so I got to thinking about study leave this year, as I do earlier on in the year, in the middle of the year, summertime, and think, Lord, what do you really want me to study this year? And I can't even remember why Revelation came into my head at the time. And it seemed like a great idea at the time. But I got some books and I got some study material and so on. And so I went away for those 10 days and started to read Revelation. And it was interesting. The Bible starts with Genesis, God creating, giving us a garden and a world to live in it, Revelation, the other end of the Bible, tells us how the story ends. So we got the beginning, which has a lot of imagery in, not as much as Revelation, but we have it at the beginning, and then at the end we have Revelation, which tells us how the earth ends, if you like. So we got the beginning and the end. And Warren Wiersbe, one of the Bible scholars from a few years back now, says, what God starts, he finishes. And we often know about the start. We don't know so much about the finish. And so many, including myself, refer to heaven as our place of rest, heaven as our final destination. The turning to Christ gives us a place in heaven, and some then think about fluffy clouds and palaces or huge banquets, and we've talked about all of those even in recent weeks and months. But the Bible, interesting enough, I don't know if you've taken this one in, doesn't end with us sitting in heaven. The Bible does not end with us sitting in heaven as our final destination. The Bible has heaven and earth coming together and being made new. That's at the end. And we'll cover this, particularly next week. There's lots of symbolism, as you've already picked up, I'm sure, in Revelation. Let me just give you a few clues, pointers, so that you know what the symbolism is about. Or when you see particularly numbers, there's a lot of numbers in Revelation, but they all tend to mean something. And if you know that, you kind of again get a clarity, because you think, oh yeah, 4, 7, yeah, I can see where that ties in. So let me give you just again a little framework, a little guideline on that. When it talks about 4, that's often talking about, I would say the 4 corners of the earth. We haven't got corners in our earth, but it covers the whole earth. In other words, the people in the world, the whole world. So when it talks about the 4, there was 4 in that reading we just had, it's talking about really the world, from east to west. When it talks about 7, there are lots of 7s in Revelation. That is the number of perfection. You probably know that already. And it tends to talk about this is what God is doing. The 7 is his purity, his pure number, and this is a godly number in that sense. There is 6 sometimes used in Revelation. That is the incomplete number. And so we get 666, to name one instance of 6. So it is not a heavenly number, it's not a godly number. We get 12 used quite a bit in Revelation. And that looks at the 12 tribes of Israel. In other words, God's people. It's not just the 12 tribes, but God's people, his chosen people. Sorry, could you turn the thermostat down earlier on? It's something on cold again now. So that's the 12. We hear things like thousands. That means many, thousands, lots of people, lots of things. You get the 144,000, and that really relates to God's people, 12 tribes, times 12, so that's quite a few. 12 times 12, that's 144. 1,000 means a lot, many, so that's why you get 144,000 of God's people, a lot of God's people, loads and loads and loads. It doesn't talk about millions in the Bible, but that could well refer to millions. So the theme of Revelation is Christ's return, battles won, and eternal glory. And the first chapter, as I've already referred to particularly, talks about the power and the majesty of Christ, and that really kind of goes right the way through Revelation. And he is very different to our understanding probably of the Jesus in the Gospels. Well, he is very different to Jesus in the Gospels. But this is the heavenly Christ, the heavenly Son of God. And to say it's worth reading through in that light. It kind of changes, I think, the whole aspect of worship. It kind of changes the whole aspect of serving the Lord, because you kind of see Christ for who he really is in that instance. So that's the first chapter. Then in the next couple of chapters, there's those 7 letters to the churches that are around the southwest of Turkey. 7 churches there that were particularly picked out, and letters were drafted, dictated, if you like, and sent out to those churches. We'll cover those next year, near the beginning of next year. You might get confused, or maybe you haven't really thought about it yet, but you might get confused when you start looking at what seems to be 2 second comings. When you pick that one up, you hear about various things to do with Jesus coming, and it seems like there's 2. There isn't, but it seems like it. And again, we need to get that clear, because otherwise the whole thing gets very confused. There's Jesus coming there, there's Jesus coming there, and I thought it was only coming again once. And what's this bit about? What's that bit about? Or are they 2 different instances, or are they the same, different angles, or what? So there is, you'll be familiar with these wordings, there is this twinkling of the eye, thief in the night type coming, where suddenly, coming, God's people taken away. There's all sorts of films written about that, made about that. That isn't the second coming, as people sometimes think it is. That is, I'll come back to that in a minute. That is not the second coming. Then there is the coming in his glory, on the clouds, when everyone will see him. So you can't have the thief in the night twinkling of the eye and everyone seeing him coming in the clouds at the same point, because they're 2 very different things. The first one is not the second coming. The second one is when he comes in all his glory and everyone around the world will see him. But we're going to look at that, say, over the next 2 Sundays in particular. Revelation was written by John. There is a debate as to which John. And I don't think it's particularly, at least for our study at the moment, important. I'm not saying it's not important, but for us here today, it's not important. Certainly he was exiled in Patmos, which is a Greek island, still there today. It was kind of like the ancient version of Alcatraz. A little island that all the criminals and prisoners were sent to. And therefore it's out, they're safe there, they're contained and so on. And I'm sure the Romans kind of put him there to stop him preaching the gospel, this John. Because he was sharing the good news, and so they shoved him in Patmos. Let's put him there in Alcatraz. He's out the way, and he won't be able to share the good news. Well, they didn't say good news, but he talked about Jesus and that to anybody, because it had the reverse effect, didn't it? They put him on this little island. He received this wonderful vision, which he was told to write down, so he wrote it down, and now years have read his words and got a greater understanding of who Jesus is than they could have ever done just listening to John going around telling a few people in Greece and so on. This vision is not to be taken literally. I think that's fairly clear from several of the passages, but just quickly picking out Revelation 1 and verse 20. The mystery of the 7 stars, it says, that you saw in my right hand, and the 7 golden lampstands is this. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. So there's imagery going on. It's not literally that there are 7 candlesticks or 7 stars. So lots of images. I admit, on the first few days of my study, I was getting confused. I was getting despondent. I really was. Before I actually went away, I did some reading and so on, and I was thinking, what have I was feeling actually quite despondent about it all. And then I started to pick up some other teaching that was very helpful. I started to get an idea of what I'm going to show you in a sec. And once I started to get this framework, then when I started to do some further reading, yeah, that slides into that, that's lots of, yeah, it all kind of making a lot more sense. I'm not saying it's all crystal clear by any means, but at least it helped. By the time I finished my 10 days, I was feeling a lot kind of happier that I'd actually taken in and understood something of what Revelation was teaching. So I brought along with me some props this morning, and they'll stay out for next week as well. I'm sorry if they kind of get in the way and they're not smart. It's bits of cardboard, but I just want to use them as props so that you, again, get this framework. Because once you get this framework, a lot of it we can fill in the gaps next week in particular, and you kind of know where we're heading with it. And I'm sure it will be as helpful as it was to me. So these are 3 main events that we have in Revelation. 3 main events. And I want to kind of label them. They got awful. So the first one is the thief of the night, twinkling of an eye, which is commonly called the rapture. And the lead up to that is now. There is no time scale between now and then. So if you say, when is the rapture, and we'll talk about the rapture more in a minute, it could be any moment. It could be today. There is no time scale. And there is nothing in the Bible to give you even a clue that you've got to wait so many days, weeks, years, decades, centuries, whatever, millennium. So it could be, or it could be this afternoon. Could be. Really could. So that's the first event. Now, between this event and this event, we do know the gap. It is 7 years. 7 years between the rapture and this event. There is white cloth, white card. This, and not every scholar will agree. I'm hoping that it seems most will agree, because everyone's got their own different interpretation of imagery and visions and so on. But this is the second coming. That's the rapture. This is the twinkling of the eye, thief in the night bit. This is the second coming. Glory, majesty, on the clouds, everyone in the world will see him. Between this event, twinkling of the eye, thief in the night, and Jesus coming, 7 years. We're We'll talk about filling in the gaps next week. This event and this event, not proportionate. Otherwise this would be somewhere in town probably. 1,000 years. 7 years, 1,000 years. And this event, which we talk about quite a lot, and you've heard talk about quite a lot, but some people kind of think it's there, some people think it's there. And again, it's fairly clear, I think, and most scholars will agree, 7 years, 1,000 years, judgment. Okay? This is given a framework for where we're heading next week. And if you do your own reading up on Revelation, hopefully you'll be able to get that framework in your head. Yeah, 7 years, 1,000 years, those three events. So we have the rapture. Several points in the Bible. Jesus says in John 14 to his own disciples, "And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that where you may be where I am also." And Jesus is preparing a place for you and me. And he's coming back. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 51 and 53. "Listen, I tell you a mystery, says Paul to the Corinthian church." Now, he hasn't got the knowledge of knowing again. He's thinking, when he's writing this letter, he's thinking this. Now, we know that 2,000 years have gone since then, so he was actually down here. But he was thinking this. So this is what he wrote to the Corinthian church. "Listen, I tell you a mystery. Not all will sleep, but we will all be changed in a flash, in a twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, the dead will rise, will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. For the perishable must clothe itself in the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality." Then again, Jesus talking in Revelation, in Matthew 24, a passage about this very subject. He says, "Two men will be in the field, and one will suddenly be taken." Twinkling of an eye. He says, "Two women will be grinding with a hand mill, and one will be taken, and the other one left." In twinkling of an eye. Suddenly. Just like that. Thief in the night. Just when you're not expecting it. So that's the rapture. So not everyone will agree with what I'm saying. This is the consensus, I think, of most. Then we get, after 7 years of that, after that, when many of the population suddenly disappeared off Earth, there will be the return of Jesus. Coming in the clouds. What we would call the second coming. And so we know, 7 years is the gap. Revelation is quite clear on that. 7-year tribulation. We'll talk about that next week. It's not a nice time, so I don't really want to think about it, but it's there. And Revelation is quite clear that there is a 7-year tribulation. And once Christ comes here, after these 7 years, another 1,000 years, remember, between this and this, Christ will reign. He will reign. And he will come, remember, with power, authority, visibly for everyone, and might and majesty, and everyone will just be in awe of the Christ as he comes. And everyone will serve him and bow down to him. There will be the battle of Armageddon. Again, we'll cover that next week. And after 1,000 years comes the third event, that of judgment. Judgment. And we talk about the Lord being the judge, the judgment day and so on. That's not then. That's not then. That's here. 1,007 years after that. And then, after judgment, there will be a new heaven and a new earth. And again, we'll touch on that next week. So we've got 3 points. We've got very clear labelling as to the distance between those two, and very clear labelling of the distance of those two. There's nothing about the distance after that. It just goes on for eternity. And there's nothing on the distance this side. And we don't know how close we are now. No one knows the day or the hour. So next week I'm going to put some more flesh on the bones and meat in the sandwich, or whatever that call it. It's going to be brief, but I hope it at least gives you a clue. It might be something at least is memorable, rather than me spend 3 months going through it all and you'll forget it all. So I'm just going to keep it easily understandable, I hope. So, let me finish with a lifelink challenge. And it's a fairly obvious question. And it's quite often asked when you look at Revelation or Second Coming. But remember, it's not the Second Coming I'm particularly thinking about at the moment. I'm thinking about this point. If you understand and believe this is the point when those who follow Jesus will go. You don't want to wait to this point. That's not a very nice bit to be in. We want to be in this point when we're caught up and taken. The thing is, we haven't got any warning. We've got warning of this. We know if we're left behind at this point, we know what's coming for the next 7 years. Here, we haven't a clue. So it could be today. Could be today. I know some might say, I don't think it will be, but that's like wishful thinking. You may think I need a bit more time. It could be today. And so the question is, of course, are you ready for it? Are you ready for it? There's going to be no warning. There's going to be no time to decide. There's no time to sort of, pack your bags or get everything ready or do some nice things or whatever. It's going to be a twinkling of an eye. Thief of the night, gone. And at that point, you've got to be ready. And it won't be, well, I need time to be more committed. I need a bit more time so I can go and take a few more cans out of people. It'd be nice to them and lead them to the Lord and that, I need a bit more time so I can give up these sin that's keep going on in my life. I need to clear that up first, and then when Jesus comes, I'll be fine and take me. Twinkling of an eye. It'll always, at that point, be too late to do anything to change. So we've got to be ready now. That's why Paul, believing that it could have been any moment, was writing the letters he did. He said, you've got to be ready. He could come at any moment. Are you ready? So if you get home today and start cooking your dinner, and Jesus suddenly, twinkling an eye, turns up like a thief in the night, are you going to be going? Are you going to be going? Think about that. Pray about that. It's important. I mean, this is really important. Will it be today, the rapture? It could be. Let's bow in prayer. Father, thank you. Thank you for the vastness and the mystery of Revelation, because it comes from you. It's not just the stories of your church here on earth. It's not just the stories of Jesus ministering here on earth. This is heavenly stuff. And we need to at least grapple with the ideas and grapple with some timescales and grapple with the challenge that you set in Revelation. And so thank you, Lord, that you've given us that ability to do even today and next week. And I pray, Lord, that each of us here this morning will be confident to say, I'm ready. If there's a sudden twinkling of an eye this afternoon, or this evening, or tomorrow morning, I'll be ready. I don't want the Lord finding me doing something or being somewhere that I shouldn't be. I want him to see me ready to go with him forever and ever. Lord, continue to challenge us. Thank you for your word. And we praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.